Um, Thank you, Program Director, for that very, very generous introduction. For this invitation, Tessie, not just for today, but for the program that we've been working on, 2019, the Women Leadership Program. And it's lovely to see the spirited gathering of a lot of alumni in this room. Prof, I missed your speech, but I heard about it already and the gravitas of what was shared, and I'm sure I'll get a recording of it afterwards, and I look forward to hearing and listening to your sage advice. And to all the speakers who shared stories this morning, both men and women. Storytelling is such a beautiful art form, and it's one of the most special ways in which we can bring people from diverse groupings into a room, and the tradition of storytelling can just grip us and bring us all together. I didn't hear all the stories, but if you were participants in the Women Leadership Program, I may have heard your story in our very first module, but I look forward to hearing those as well. So when I was asked by Tessie to talk on this topic, firstly, I had to think long and hard. Look, you're all very, very smart people, right? Way smarter than I am academically. But I thought, I have this good blend of academia and practitioner, because I work in corporates every day, and I've been in multiple roles. I'm not an academic. I'm not a pure academic. So please, please do not judge judge me on that level. So I want to make that clear, because I'm more of a practitioner and being at the cold face of practice. Because what do we do in this industry, in this sector? We are ensuring that our graduates are relevant for the world of work. And that means we have to be relevant. So I'm coming wearing these very complex hats, and I'm going to use what I know and what I experience in the workplace and what I see both locally, regionally, and globally. And I've drawn on that to pull on what I think is very important for us today. But let's talk about, how did you arrive today? Now, I love seeing a room. Oh, I've been told I've got to stand here so you can hear me. Thank you, Chris or Jack. Let's talk about why in a gathering like this do we find people like going to the back of the room? I'm sure you ask your students this, right? Why does that happen?
Because they can hear too loudly. I like sitting in the back, because most of my school life, my parents made me sit in front.
Oh, so it's right. I mean, and you're not far back. At least we have direct line of sight of each other. But that's interesting. It's weird. You can go to a big corporate event. You can go to a classroom setting, and you'll find how people arrange themselves and group themselves. And today we're talking about inclusiveness. So what am I going to ask you to do? What do you think I'm going to ask you to do? Yeah, come along, guys at the back. Come forward. I want to connect with you. Just do it to indulge me. Maybe those rows at the back there, come along. By the way, this is not a transactional lecture session where I'm going to stand here. For those of you who know me, you know it's not that, right? Where I'm going to stand here and I'm going to tell you stuff. We're going to co-create and we're going to co-understand this topic together. Thank you, guys. Thank you for rearranging yourselves. So I'm going to start with this question. Today's the 1st of August. And you know, in our country, we make this big story about the month of August. And you know what it's about, right? So say it. What is the month of August? Which is exactly what I wanted you to say, and I want to challenge that. So if we're talking about creating inclusive workplaces, and if we focus on women and gendered identities in the month of August, 11 months of the year, we let this go. And that is part of the big issue that I see play out in multiple layers, whether in business, whether in government, whether in society. Right? So just as the opener, but having said that, the 9th of August is upon us. Gosh, I can't believe we're in August. It is crazy. West, as you get more gray hair, it goes by faster. So I want to ask the question, and I would like to have some responses. Now, I lecture MBA students, and I'm very good at cold calling. I did a fantastic course with Clayton Christensen at Harvard that has taught me how to cold call and how to be like a chihuahua and not let go till you respond. So, let's go. How did you arrive today? And I'll just take hands. I'll start with hands, and if there's no hands, I will do the call. And this is where I lose eye contact with people. See? May I invite you? It's lovely, even when we past being, 18, 19, 20-year-olds in university, that we still do this, right? How awesome. It is beautiful. I don't know your name, so please introduce yourself and respond.
Okay. My name is Inst. For those that don't know me, how did I arrive today? I was actually very excited to come and attend this event. I was actually a bit worried that I might be late because of some other matters, but I'm very happy that I'm here and I'm enjoying the program so far.
Fantastic.
Thanks.
I hope I'm not going to disappoint for the rest of the program.
Luckily I can run quickly.
So thank you for anticipating the excitement of being in this room. In fact, as I looked around, I can count the number of men here. And that is another ping. Because to change any circumstance, any situation, we need all the stakeholders in the room together. If you just think about our country, there's good intentions, there's money, but we don't have the right stakeholders in the room together with the right intent to change the dynamic. And I'm not just talking about South Africa. The same is true around the world. I mean, look at what's happening in Ukraine and Russia. A year plus ago, and look at what Ukraine is reduced to now. So part of inclusive workplaces is having all the voices together. If you talk to people who work in conflict resolution, they'll tell you that we can go blue in the face, coming up with the greatest strategies, but if you don't have all the stakeholders around that table, that conflict resolution is going to come to naught. So, thank you for arriving, firstly, despite all the other things that were going on. And then, of course, for the excitement and the enjoyment. And then maybe after this program, for the next Women Leadership Forum event, you will convince, nudge, nudge, a few of your other colleagues to join. All right, thank you for getting us started. Let's go to... thank you. I love volunteers.
That question jogged the analyst in me.
Uh-huh.
I was trying to analyze that question. What exactly is being asked? How did I arrive? How was I born? How did I arrive?
I love it. People do this in every session.
Am I supposed to talk about the mentors who were the ones who applied for me to come to TNT? How did I arrive today? Where? Where? Here or at TNT in general?
I don't know.
Or in this world?
I don't know.
Did I travel? Should I fly? From the Eastern Cape to...
I don't know. You telling us.
Okay. No, I walked from the parking space and got into...
Fantastic. 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 There is no right and wrong answer. And now with ChatGPT, you can just get all the answers anyways, right? So I love that response. And this works every time when I ask this question. Because part of what happens in that very scientific, clever, I start off saying, you're all very clever people. And then we go deep into the analysis, and we miss sometimes the opportunity to just be. Because brains, our clever brains, start to overanalyze all the time. Yeah? You know, when you can't sleep at night, it's because the brain is like, oh, she said that, but actually what she meant was that. And why did she say it in that tone? Why did she say it in front of that person? Or why did he turn his back when he saw me? And we do this, and we do this, and then we take ourselves out of the race before we enter the game. And ladies and gentlemen, I work in JSE listed companies here, I work in companies around the world, and I see this happen time after time. And we get so complicated in our, and the answer could have just been like, how are you feeling today? How are you doing right now? You know, because we emotional, spiritual, physical, complex beings, but somebody may be sitting in this room right now with something that's sitting somewhere, from the belly to the head, wherever. And I just need that to be drawn out. But there is no right and wrong answer. In fact, your answer is beautiful, because it allowed me to give an impromptu lecture on how complex we are and how we overcomplicate when the answer could be just as beautiful as... I was so excited to be here today. Right. Let me ask one or two more people, and then... Okay, come, volunteer. You're all excited. I can see it. Thank you.
So Portia and I spoke when we got here. We're like, it's actually just so nice to take a day out of our schedule and spend some time on me and some women investment. So it just feels like a wholesome day to me.
Wonderful. That time out day. And it's not that you're skiving off work, because the stuff that you're going to experience here, the knowledge, the relationships, the experiences, you're actually going to take this, you're going to reflect on it, and you're going to plow it back at home, in your classrooms, with your colleagues around hectic academic conversations. And so that investment in self, by the way, do you know this, that women invest, they put themselves at the bottom of the invest. When you get paid, and you probably got paid like a few days ago. When do you guys get paid here? 25th. And when that ping came into your cell phone, you were thinking, I've got to pay X, Y, Z, And then who's at the bottom of that list? So that investment in yourself today is spot on. Because our plates overflow like this constantly. And you keep saying, okay, I'll take more. Because we do that as well. And the building of these inclusive workspaces tells us if one of us, and it's not about gender here, but if you've seen somebody sagging under the weight of something, emotional, spiritual, physical, intellectual, it's our responsibility to say, I don't want to sound like a bank now, but how can I help you? Right? So thank you for that. Yes. I have such fond memories of your stories, Cheryl, from when we did the session at the CSRR.
Right, I'm the crazy one, all right? So when I heard about this program, I knew my colleague was also going to be here. And you know what? This morning when I woke up, I said, I'm coming back to my family.
Oh,
because the Women for Leadership, we are a forum and we are a family. And thank you, Tessie, for doing what you have done. Because guess what? This course changes people. And it changed me. And today I walked in here and I said, you know what? I'm alumni and I've been changed, and I hope all of you get the same feeling today as what I got a year back. And I'm different, and I kick ass.
Wonderful. Cheryl, yeah. I'm going to start with your opening words, though. And the opening words were, I am?
Sure.
No. I'm the crazy.
I'm crazy.
Yeah. Right. So I just want to lock onto that for a bit.
Cheryl, C for crazy.
Yeah. Agree. That it goes together. But that's another thing that happens all the time, is that women will preface something with that. I'm the crazy one. I'm the clever one. I'm the quiet one. That is discounting language. Even though you may be absolutely crazy, and I absolutely love that about you. Because that's crazy. And I love it. And I'm sure we all do. Yeah. But that part that comes before is the discounting part. And we start like that, and then in the mind of other people sitting around us, that first 30 seconds, your first 30 seconds matters. Because when you're watching Netflix or anything and it's boring, the first 30 seconds, it's a goner. Right? But I don't think that's ever going to happen with you, Cheryl, because your energy is so bubbling over. But I loved what you were saying about family, right? And let's think about workplaces and family, because we're talking inclusive workspaces. How much of our time do we spend here, our most productive part of the day? And how much of time do we spend at home? So this place, the place that we come to work, should also be seen more than just work. So when you say family, Cheryl, what do you mean by that?
Well, would you stand up?
Up to you.
Family is where I feel loved. And where people listen and people understand of who you are and where you come from and your circumstances, and they do not judge you. You are part of this bigger picture. I always believe in puzzles, and each one of you have now just become part of my puzzle. And if one of you are missing, it's like a piece in a missing puzzle. It's never complete. So that's where I am.
Fantastic.
I'm part of the puzzle, the whole picture.
Thank
What
you.
you see is what you get.
Yeah, there's too much of complexity and ambiguity otherwise. So, I mean, think about when we're dealing with people, right? It's a complex topic. So in the future, there will be no women leaders, just leaders. Women in Leadership Forum, Women in Leadership, and it's not just TUT, by the way. It's all these programs where we devote our time and attention to gender debates and gender studies, and women in leadership, women in business, women in society, women in government. And that's part of the complexity. Because when we distinguish between our roles, if you're a dean, doesn't matter whether you're a woman dean or a man dean. Yeah, man. Hello, Vanessa. I didn't recognize you with the new hairstyle. You look fabulous. I heard the voice and I know that voice. Do you understand? But we're a long way from there. It is truckloads away from there. In fact, the research shows, and I have to be clever because you're so clever, right? But you know, the stats and on all the things, like half the stats we say is made up. But this one is not. This one, that a girl child born today, it would take her, listen to this, it would take her 50 years to be considered equivalent to her male counterpart for a government role. So in other words, a woman president, God forbid. What happens when we have women presidents? They start wars. They destroy economies. Now I'm being facetious. You know that, right? Then, God forbid, she leads the country and then she says, I have burnout and I'm stepping down. You know, I'm talking about Jacinda Ardern. Or even more, God forbid, she has a baby and takes the baby into a G8 summit together with husband in tow to breastfeed, for her to breastfeed and then the husband to do that. So you see what happens when we have women in leadership roles. Absolutely. Absolutely. So we are a long way away from this. And I gave you the stats about women leading countries. It gets scarier when you listen to what the stats and the research shows, that it'll take a girl child born today 100 years to be considered equivalent to her male counterpart to lead a corporate. Not in my lifetime. I'm on the way out. Not in your lifetime, unless you're already one of those who are going to be living up to 150 and 200. Our money's going to run out before we run out. So this is, it makes sense. And all of you know Sheryl Sandberg, right? You know her lovely book about lean in some more. She's the CEO of Facebook now, called Meta, right? But we still have to have this conversation. That is why this still matters. And that is why it is wonderful to see the men in the room today. Because for us to get to that state of inclusive workplaces, we're going to need to lobby bigger support. And I've seen it done very successfully in some organizations. So it's not that it can't be done, but it's a lot of by design work. It's not going to happen automatically. So, what is your status quo now? What does it look like now? What does the ideal state of inclusive workplace look like? And can it be attained? I don't know, I'm asking these tough questions. And then what needs to be in place to achieve and sustain this agenda? Because gender agenda is still very much on the table. And you do know this. It has actually rolled back since 2020 when the whole world was put on a pause. COVID. So we were making great progress. Government policies, practices, institutional policies and practices, and then COVID hit, and everything else was put in a pause, and the focus was on just surviving, of course. So, the question therefore is, what is your current status? And yes, I know we've been recorded, live streamed, whatever. But if we don't have frank conversations, then nothing will change. You need like some breakthrough. Could be one little thing, like the simple thing of having more men in this room today. What is, let me, I don't know, you would probably know, you know the stats. So what is the staff complement gender split at TUT currently? What is it? I'm talking about the general staff complement. Would you say 50-50?
I think it's about 51% female, 49% male, if I remember.
51
management level.
50 management level, or just across. 51% female, 49 male. Management level? Let's talk executive level.
3 women.
It's very low.
Low.
Yeah, it is. I think when it comes to management, TUT lacks in having the gender equality. You know, we had to go to even the gender commission to explain those. So I saw those stats, and unfortunately we are lacking in that. We have more male leaders than we do have women leaders. And then it goes back to what you were talking about. If we do not have men in the same spaces have been part of the conversation to change, they will never see the need to actually bring in women. Because even when you go into appointing in these positions, you know, you have all these other factors that play a role, like political influence, like, you know, everybody has whatever they want. They never look at, we have a problem of having equity in our workspaces and management. They would rather push those agendas, but this one, it just falls there until it rises up again that it is a problem that needs to be addressed. So as I stand now, as me working for this institution at this current moment, I do not see us actually solving this problem anytime soon, because we do not have people who are willing to do that.
Wow. I'll let that percolate a bit. Thank you for sharing, and sharing so frankly. Because that's the other problem, right? We mutter behind certain doors, closed doors, water cooler talk, and then we don't place the issues on the table. And that's the start of where we say we have, just looking at the statistics, right? We have an issue around the critical mass. So what I want to suggest is not that it can't be done, because part of what we'll talk about is whose job is it to bring about the change. So you see the person who looks back at you from the mirror. That person has a role to play. And you may think I'm talking whatever. Let's just take a few steps back. 30 years ago. Pre-democracy. We never thought this would be possible. But it took courage. It's not going to be an easy thing. Because if we don't think about this as an opportunity to bring about the change, your children, your grandchildren will be sitting in the same seats having the same conversation. It took blood, sweat, and tears. Now, heaven forbid, I'm not suggesting we start a revolution or anything. But there are mechanisms that we can utilize to change the workplaces. Now, some of the conversations is, now I happen to have worked with Prof. Maluleke at University of Pretoria. Short period of time, but I worked with him at a high level. And I want to say this to you, as I said to the groups of people that I met in the class in the Women Leadership Program. You have a window of opportunity with him as your VC. And that window, how many years has been in seat? 3 years. That window of opportunity is moving. Firstly, do you know your Vice Chancellor? Part of the problem. So we sit and we have academic discussions without mobilizing. The first thing I would suggest, and Taniko's going to have my head for saying this, but hey, as part of the Women in Leadership Forum, all of you who are participating today, all of you, the critical mass that you have in that program, it asks Prof. Taniko for a cup of tea one day and say, we'd love to have this conversation with you. Are you brave enough to do that?
I think it's not, I don't think it's about bravery or
Yeah.
anything. I think it's about the way he's being portrayed within the institution, the gatekeepers, his availability. There's a lot more at play. And are you at the right level to engage this man?
We had
It doesn't matter.
breakfast with him.
Yeah.
He was very open and
So I just want to build on this. The
Okay.
gatekeepers. Gatekeepers are that's probably first part of the problem,
Yeah.
right? So I'm suggesting there's always, it's not just here, right? It's everywhere. And bravery, I was just being deliberately provocative about the bravery. Yes, I've been reminded I've got I should have had one of those lapel mics, because I'm like that kind of person. But it's okay. I'll hang on to this one and stay here. So the point of this is, whether it's the gatekeepers, whether it is, I don't know, what agendas may be at play that says you can't see the VC. Tessie was just saying that you did have a breakfast with him and he was open. I can bet my bottom dollar if you said to him that this grouping would love to have a one-on-one conversation with you, I am pretty certain he will say yes. I'm going to leave it there because I'm now can't spend the whole time talking about that. But that's, if we're looking at the status quo, right? And we know what the ideal state would look like, or we think we know what the ideal state would look like, and can it be attained? Part of can it be attained is the first steps we take. Because sometimes the elephant is so big that we don't even make the first move to try and solve for it, because it's too big an issue. It's too complex an issue. So there's a couple of levels in which we have to, because it's not as simple as, somebody mentioned the political will, right? So the complexity of creating inclusive workplaces is, and that is why I broke it down, because you can do a couple of things, but you still may hit a brick wall. So it needs, firstly, policies at the higher level. Thank you so much. At the higher level, the macro level, the country and societal level, the pressure. Like when strikes happen, what is that meant to do? Pressure, disruption. It's drawing attention to something, and that's not what I'm suggesting that you do. But that is the kind of thing that has happened, and we've seen it ramping up. In fact, as we get to elections, you're going to see a lot more, right? So things need to change at a country level. How many of you watched Rolf Mayer's interview with J.J. Taban about a week ago, when he talked about the country 30 years on? If you haven't seen that interview, I would urge every one of you to watch it. Because it reminds us of how we got into this room today. Because have a look around this room. All of us, just on the basis of race, wouldn't be sitting here together. Simple dynamic, right? And who thought it was possible? Then at a or sector level, and then I made meso TUT specific, that means at an industry level. What is the norm in academia, in higher education institutions? In fact, I want to even push you to think along these lines. At the moment, leadership is at a crossroads at public higher education institutions. You do know that, right? You know a lot of VCs have gone. There's an opportunity that presents itself for a changing of guards. And let me just take you back a little bit. Just before this current guard changed, prior to that, it was white males. And then you saw the current guard, and then there's an opportunity for the next guard. And I want to suggest to the women in this room, firstly, put your hand up. Because what happens is that we say, I'm not going to get the job, right? And you don't even put your name into the race. So, I know it's a tough one. I see smiles around the room. And I know. But that's part of the process of breaking you down. And you keep trying. If not here, somewhere. Like right now, there's a leadership vacuum at higher education institutions. Oh, the last one is the micro, you. So you may not be able to influence all the policies. You may not be able to influence who's the gatekeeper. Where's those gatekeepers, by the way? I'd like to meet those gatekeepers. Because they go, oh no, you can't see the VC, he's the VC. You can't see the president, he's the president. Well, those individuals are public serving individuals. They're not there because they're holier than thou. Same with heads of CEOs of companies. And it's not that I'm just talking about public service. I'm talking about you there because as whether it's the CEO of a bank, my contribution to that bank puts you in that place. So your influence is important. And that is why I took you a few decades back to say the pressure that gets put along the way. And here's the thing. The pressure can work when we have critical mass. If you try to do it as one or two people, you're in a hiding second to none. Because then you're the tall poppy. And then you get targeted. But if you're doing it, because we'll get to just now why it matters. Because it's not because we're saying the men are not good or the women are better. It's saying we need diversity, because then diversity is the part on the journey to inclusion and becoming and belonging. And in that way, we're representative with a microcosm of the macrocosm. Just thought I'll remind us. Sad. But how many more of this do we need? Not just a TUT. Before this, we had UCT and. How much more of this do we need to have? The stats on gender-based violence and femicide. Shocking, hey? It's like, in fact, the stats mirror what would be typical of a war-torn country. And yet we're not at war. But it feels like we're at war with ourselves. And that's why COVID was such a massive thing. Imagine being in lockdown, hard lockdown, with the perpetrators, because you had nowhere to turn. So we go through this, we see what happens, and then we'll go, we'll have all these kind of angst and concern, and then it's like, then normalize, and then you're back into the normal work until the next one happens. And there, by the grace of God, could go one of us. So, 9th August, 1956. Oh, my slide disappeared. I see what happened. Sorry, I don't know what happened to the one slide, but I had a lovely picture. So I'll create the picture for you. 1956. I know you're way too young. You won't even. But you know history. 1956. What happened in 1956? 9th August. We get a public holiday. I know. Oh, yeah, we don't have to come to work. But what happened in 1956? This is where the cell phones are out. Are we Googling or are we... there's no academic answer. Just give me thoughts. Let's go to the back of the room there. The lady with the beautiful headdress. The vibrant color. So women marched to union buildings to raise their voices, concerns. Do you know the full story behind it? So we think. How beautiful that we're saying this and we're talking about creating inclusive workplaces. When 20,000 women in 1956 marched to the union building to protest against the past laws of this country. So one of the things that I wanted us to do is to focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because I've heard people use these three things interchangeably, as though they're one and the same. So I was going to ask you to do this thinking pairs and talking to each other, but I think we've just had a lot of talking going on. So the energy's up. So let's just take some thoughts around what do you think, what are the key points around diversity, equity and inclusion? What would you consider to be the key differentiations? No right and wrong answers, so don't worry about that.
Just for clarity, the key words for?
Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because we talk about diversity, you hear a lot about diversity. And then people will throw in the word inclusion or equity, and then it's as though it's one and the same thing. And they're actually not.
I'll say diversity is everybody, all colors, genders, religion, together, the same sport, without any, you are less, but just equally. Inclusion, I'll say it's when everybody has given the same voice or same platform, regardless of diversity, who you
Got
are
it.
from, but you're all given the same voice to actually make the same, come to the same conclusion, or they're given the same platforms. And then equity, that one is for us to be equal but not equal. Yeah, that one.
Nice try. Anybody wants to add to that? But you're on the right track. Yes, go for it.
I want to just add to what she's just
Uh-huh.
mentioned now, that it's, from what I'm hearing, is that there's a huge difference between the words, explaining the words, but they actually need each other. They are like different links of the same.
Correct. Quite right.
That you need
Yes.
equity in diversity and to be inclusive, because you need
Yeah.
to include
So-
everything based on the differences.
So let's just take this example. Thank you both for getting us thinking. We need all of that for inclusion, for workplaces and workspaces and societies and countries to change. So let's just quickly look at this as touching on exactly what you said. So that's the first one, is about our differences, right? Race, gender, class, age, sexual identity, religion, and. Lived experience, qualifications, experience in academia versus corporate. That's why diversity matters, because then you have different perspectives. Now, equity refers to the concept of fairness and justice. And if you think about justice for a minute, remember, women have been trebly prejudiced all through history on the basis of colonialism, patriarchy, and then apartheid. Right? So if you can't talk about equity without talking about what's just. And then inclusion is this collaborative environment. So you remember earlier your colleague was sitting here, I'm sorry I didn't get her name, but she said it will not change. But it will not change if we don't collaborate to bring about the change. And that's an important thing, the collaboration of across levels, and truthfully, we talk about the hierarchies, but we need champions all across to say we've got to collaborate, because the benefit is for all of us. So when we talk about these differences, I want you to, this is just another way of looking at it, but I just want to go to that sweet spot in the middle. Now you have become, you're all in this room because you have become. It needs me. Because you've built up yourself, you've gained your qualification, you've gone on to achieve things, so you've become The question is, do you belong? That's a hard one. It's like in a marriage, sad but true. You can be equal partners in terms of contribution to the marriage, in terms of monetary, financial, emotional, but if you don't have a say, if there isn't collaborative, communal problem solving, how to raise the children, how to spend our money, then do you belong? Hard one. And I love this one best, so I'm going to share this one. And I think I may have shared it with you before. It's, if you think about this, it in the analogy of a dance, and I wish we could actually get up and dance right now because we need positive energy. Diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance. And that was it remains a beautiful quote from Werner Meyers. But I've taken it one step further and saying this to you. While transformation is actually you taking to the dance floor and dancing to your own beat. Because you can be good and wait for the invitation. And if I don't like you, you can wait forever. I was looking to bring the video in, but if you haven't seen Tyler Perry's Building Your Own Tables, he made this beautiful, Tyler Perry is an American actor, investor in movies, producer, and he says, if there's no seat at the table for you, go build your own table. And here's why I'm saying this to you. Think of a country like ours. Look at the unemployment in our country. We wait for big business to create the employment. Now you in this room, you are super smart people. Why aren't you thinking about business creation? Maybe you are. Because we need more of that to transform. On Saturday, I was invited to work with a group of 10 really smart entrepreneurs, all women in this country. And they are moving and shaking, and they are, watch what's coming. There's a tsunami coming. Because these women are not waiting to be invited. They were working for big corporates. They've got the givens, right? In terms of you need the credentials, you need the studies, you need all of that. And then they go, I'm going to get stuck in the belly of organizations. So how are you actually going to belong? Or are you just a visitor here? If you're a visitor, you need to review that. And I mean, it's true for any place. Either you become part of challenging the status quo, even if it means you're going to get scars. Look at what's going on outside right now. Because voices need to be heard. I'm not saying what has been. I'm not passing judgment on the actual cause of action. But when there is dissent and your voice is not heard, either you can choose to that, or you say as critical mass exactly what's going out. How do we bring this to the table? Always critical mass. That's how you and I got into this room. Okay? So the benefits. Who's going to argue against these benefits? Do you not want to be the best? Best university? You know, the universities compete. You write, you do all your research because that's one of the metrics that's been used to measure against competitiveness. But the benefits of gender diversity is clear. It is proven. So why then do we not work towards achieving and attaining this? Number one, different perspectives. And actually, one day, it was Tanika who said this to me. I remember at UP, I was there, as I said, for a short period of time. And that was the time, I can't remember what was the reason for all the protest action. Not just at UP, fees must fall, I think. And I said, but why are people burning the buildings at universities?
And the libraries.
And the libraries.
All that history, the
UCT, right?
And the paintings.
And he said, what about a different perspective? I remember him saying this to me. He said, if your pain is so intense and no one hears you, I'm not making, there's no judgment from my side. I'm just sharing with you about having different perspectives. Because if you are serving a particular community and society and a profile of student, but you don't understand what is that thing that creates the fire in their belly, you're not going to change anything. And the same is true on gender diversity in the workplace. Staff retention. That's a straightforward one. If you're happy, Cheryl, and this is home, and this is family, you're going to stay. You want to contribute. You want to go above and beyond to make this the best. Improve recruitment and reputation, because you're still recruiting to get more people in, and you're competing with the sea of institutions. So what's the value proposition that you bring? And having diversity in the sense, gender diversity in the workplace is one of those things that ramps up your reputation. I know some of you could argue with me, but some places where they've had, the leaders been women, it hasn't been a sweet deal. But that's another lecture for another day, right? Another lecture for another day. Here's the big one. Why do businesses exist? Whether you're a higher education, whether you're a private sector, it's for bottom line results. Yeah? Now we talk about the triple bottom line, but let's talk about the bottom line results. If the research shows the greater your top diversity in your top team, the greater is your financial rewards. Who argues against that? Who says, no, I don't want more money to build a better? Better reflection of customers. We've touched on this briefly. So your students are the customers, right? But if we don't have a diverse team understanding them, you're going to have a narrow perspective of what their needs, what are the things that create the fire in their belly. Collaboration. We just said inclusion is as a result of collaboration. And the talent pool. In fact, the greater the talent pool we have, in fact, we can grow our own word, retain a diverse talent pool, and as you do that, when you get to that senior level, you've grown the people internally to get to the top. But you need to be open to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Otherwise, what happens with organizations that have DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion policies in place, and they say, we want this to happen? It can be as simple as, I have a bunch of money that I'm going to say, use this money, do a whole lot of programs, do a whole lot of things, fix what's not working, but the true intention is not realized because there isn't the right intent. and the right support all the way from the top down, this way, and across the organization. Because what happens with corporates generally? Who does the training and diversity and inclusion and the reporting? HR. Sorry, anyone in HR here? And so what happens is that HR then becomes transactional about putting together these events. Like, think about Women's Month. Whoa, there's going to be a lot of activity at corporates, right? But that's just a transactional engagement. No one is actually going within and saying, this is not going to change. It's like putting a plaster on a wound and not treating the wound. Yeah? Exactly. So diversity and inclusion in the workplace means by cultivating an environment that values diversity, promotes inclusivity, so that the gatekeepers you talked about say, actually, those gatekeepers actually, sorry, I'm going to say it, are bullies. Because they stand between you and actual transformation. And so we have this rich tapestry of ideas that emerge when we have diverse group. I mean, think about this group here today. Imagine if we had lots more time, how wonderful ideas, how many more unpickings there would have been of what does that mean to arrive today? And look at the different thoughts that start to come together. Because we only know what we know. We seldom know how much the other person knows and how much of that can help in problem solving. And Lord knows how many problems do we have. We have one right outside the door right now, isn't it? And then I love this in the corporates that I'm working where I see this is not just transactional. Do you know how people want to work for those companies? On the other hand, some of the big JSE listed companies, everything on paper is amazing. The story, the narrative, the brand's proposition is great. And then people go there with fire in their belly and very quickly get, right? So women leadership can contribute to developing a culture that values diversity and makes all employees feel valued. Like right now, do you feel valued? I know the answer of a few of you because I've worked with you in some of the modules. And if you don't feel valued, like in your family, like in your other family at work, you're not going to realize your full potential. Because who gives off of their best if they're not being valued? No, it's counterproductive. I just want to say the last line on that was, treat diversity as a strategic asset. Now, let's talk about that for a minute. Diversity as a strategic asset. So, when what was going on outside, it's quiet now, so I'm assuming it's died out. What did we first think about protecting? Ourselves?
Send
'Cause-
Ingrid out. She just went out. So she's done a difference.
Well done.
A woman in leadership.
There we go. Okay, done. My job here is done. But we thought about our cars, didn't we? We thought about the building. We thought about the human resources, us, students, and the lecturers were being pulled out of the class because those are valuable assets. And if we apply our minds in the same way to diversity, and when I say diversity now, I'm talking about the inclusion and equity. When EXCO and the leadership says, if this is going to be a key performance area for me this year, and if I don't meet it, I'm prepared to be penalized for it. The corporates that I've worked in, that I've seen this done successfully, is where the leadership says, I will commit to 30% this year, or 40%. And if I miss it, you may reduce my bonus or my shares or whatever by that percent. Now that's tied to tangible things. It's only going to happen when it's seen as a strategic asset, not a nice to have, not a luxury, not a, by the way, I'll send the whole slide deck to Tessie for distribution. It was done specifically for you. So, 3 areas to help us drive equality. 1, recognize the business value. We talked about the rands and cents just now, of gender equality through formalized processes and measured outcomes. Now you know, what gets measured gets done. And if you miss those measures, like let's take South African politics, right? You can move the goalposts, bring in another minister because we've load shedding. Just move the goalposts. But who's being held accountable? That's one. A bottom-up approach to providing equitable benefits to our full workforce. Now, you know the sad story of Marikana a few years ago, right? And it's like as if though it was so recent. Actually, it was in August, if I'm not mistaken. So it's an anniversary coming up. If the people who toil and extract the minerals, they get paid like a fingernail, and as you go up that value chain, the benefits of, and we'll talk, executive pay, and we can argue against each of those things, right? But if the value is not distributed equally, we are setting ourselves up for more discord. Because as we saw now, and as we've been seeing over the last few years in South Africa, when people are discontent, they're no longer keeping quiet. You've seen that. And the programs and initiatives, such as this, Tessie, that is why I'm such a fan of what you're doing, because while we may think, okay, this program is just a program and it's not going to make impact. I heard what you said, Cheryl, and I know the alumni sitting in this room, because it catalyzes something in you. And if it catalyzes something in you, you then have a ripple effect on a number of people, because we all do. We're all a sphere of influence. And so, as we grow the critical mass here, you are the agents of the change. Not outside of this room. That is why I was so happy to see a handful of men, because there's a big ask on the handful of men that have joined us today. Because the benefits outweigh the negatives. And if that is what it is, why are we fighting against it? And more importantly, let me ask you this. How many of you are parents? Boy children and girl children. Yeah? And those boy children and girl children, you're teaching your young daughters, both men and women. I say this to the men who are not wanting to adopt the policies and the changes, or their mindset is still like, very often they'll say, no, but we're focusing on the strategic goals of the business. And the business of business is business. And the business of business is bottom line results, right? But you've got girl children and boy children. What's going to happen to your daughter? Or what's going to happen if the pendulum swings the other way? So we're never going to have that it's never ever going to be equal. Not in my lifetime. There'll always be groups of people who have the bigger advantage at different points in history. It happens to be for women now. But it's up to you. It's not an academic discussion. It is, what are you willing to pay to get, and I don't mean pay as an expedient pay, to get the benefit. It is 1956, ladies. I didn't finish that story. You know why I love that why it is so pivotal for us to understand. You know, in 1956, there weren't cell phones. There were no landlines. I don't think maybe there weren't landlines. Smoke signals, they had. Maybe a few people had, eh? No TVs, for sure. No, yes. But how did 20,000 women mobilize? How did 20,000 women who came from the suburbs, the rural areas, from the townships, how did they know we're meeting and we're marching? Today, you and I are more connected than ever before, not. And we can't organize a piss-up in a brewery. Crude way of saying it. It's true. Think about those women in 1950. Tessie, I've always told you I want you one year to take the women to the women's jail in Concourt and Conhill. That is one of the things that will change your mind about how you see how men and women in our country fought together, collaboratively, for us to be here together. And we often make the mistake. So first, when it was apartheid, we said it was about black versus white. Yet, black and white work together to bring down that structure. Then when it's about gender equality, we think it's the women who have to fight the fight. It's not. All through history, the examples are there. The collaborative nature in which we will need to work to bring about the change. Otherwise, your children are going to ask you this lovely question. Besides asking you how much you left for them in the will. So what did you do? You were smart, talented, educated. And you allowed it to happen and continue to happen in your watch. I'm sorry for being harsh, but I am not sorry for being harsh.
You forgot to tell us how they mobilized.
Yes, I told you. Because there was a will to mobilize. Not through it. There was a connectedness about what was wrong. And the women in this country, through smoke signals or communities, places of worship, wherever, said, we are gathering. And it's hard to fathom that, right? Now that you've taken me back
and
there.
I can't remember, we were taught the 3 V's: voice, vision, and I can't remember the third one, Tessie. It was in one of our sessions.
Yeah, the 3.
Last year, the 3 V's: voice, vision, and I can't.
It was my class. Now I can't even. You take it.
See, I do
You see, you crazy, Cheryl. You've just taken me off. No, I'm joking. But yeah, having the vision, having the voice, having the something. It'll come back to me now. So here's a simple analysis, and I'm just mindful that I do want to wrap up a little bit earlier than we planned.
It's calm outside.
It's calm. Okay, you tell me. I'm in your hands. Firstly, you have to create a safe place. Remember, just going, and safety not just for our students, for us when we come here. To be honest, I didn't panic when I just didn't want my husband to drive into the middle of that. I didn't panic because we're all together. And if something happens, we're going to do whatever needs to happen together. Right? Because the reason I'm sharing that example about the women, a lot of women were thrown in jail. And that is why at some point, please let's do the Constitution Hill visit. You will cry. I've not seen grown men cry as much as I've seen them cry on that visit to Constitution Hill. So, safety. Women, and this is from a McKinsey report, so they refer to women of color or orientation. And for a minute, we haven't even talked about sexual identity and orientation. If you don't identify with being male or female, what happens to those individuals? Are they further ostracized? Are they further made to feel unsafe? Because then they don't belong. And this is what, this is not a McKinsey report, it was a Harvard Business Review report, is to emphasize the business case for diversity. You've got to start with the business case. See, when you're talking to leaders, if they don't see it is a business case, they go, it's a soft, warm, fuzzy thing. It's not a strategic asset. And so you've got to start with the business case. Does that make sense? The fact that we are living, and increasingly so, because borders are now porous, we are moving across borders, countries are no longer one homogeneous group. For those of you, I know you were in Dubai recently, Tessie, your last trip.
Just my job.
Yes. If you go to Dubai each time you go to Dubai, not just the skyline changes, look at the cosmopolitan mix of people from across the world. And therefore, everywhere, I'm just using Dubai as an example, but the whole world is no country is any longer one homogeneous group. And therefore, if you don't have people from a diverse group managing businesses, they are still going to think it's business as usual. And of course, this research showed that when workplace teams reflect their target customers, the entire team is more than twice as likely to innovate effectively for their end users. Let's take our good Pretoria friend, Elon Musk. Nice example, hey? But here's the thing about, this man's, now it's no longer Twitter, it's now X, right? I think he has too much money. He doesn't know what to do with his money. He's lost a lot of money, but he doesn't. I think that if you look at the talent that sits in our country, I'm talking Elon Musk, for example. How many more are sitting right here in your midst, in this country, and we don't know them because we haven't moved towards diversity and inclusion? right? So the one difficulty around creating inclusive workplaces is that, women say to me, so we're so prepared, we've studied, we've attained the qualifications, we've done in this landscape, published, done community practice, done everything, and still we remain on the fringes and the outside. That is when the actual tables at these institutions are so institutionalized, and it moves in periods of time throughout history, that things won't change until we recognize bias. Now, we talk about bias so glibly. He or she is biased because on the basis of race, gender, class, sexual identity, religion, culture, whatever, all those layers. So do you see how complex this is? It's not a simple thing as race and gender. So what needs to happen is not to de-bias individuals only. We have to de-bias organizations. That's one of the steps that needs to happen here, right? And I want to give you scenarios, and you'll read this and recognize the scenarios. You've been in these meetings where a woman puts up her hand, raises a brilliant point, and then they go, oh, that's her again. What do you have to say? Right? We know this. It's happening around us. So how do you stop this? How do you stop it? If you're around that table, what's your duty? Whether you're a man or a woman, is to say, hold on, she was making a point. Let's just go back to her. So, that's why I'm being specific. It's not just women, because the chances are there'll be a few of you around the table. It means anyone around that table. It's like your dinner table. If your youngest is trying to say something and you go, the two older children are like, oh, 8-year-old, what does she or he know? Keep quiet, we'll talk to you later. What do you go back and you say, no, hold on. Right? It's the same practice. So the stuff that we want to see happen in our homes has to happen in the workplace and vice versa. Right? Another scenario. This one happens as well. So here's a male, and they've been struggling with childcare, and he goes, if I put my hand up and say, I've got a problem because my wife is traveling today and I need to work from home, I'm making up my own story from the scenarios. Is there bias around that? But why do you need to take care of your children? Yeah? So the bias is not just against women. It's both ways. So de-biasing an organization is more important than just the individual, right? The other one is when women who are choosing not to have babies or choosing not to marry, and they go, okay, but why can't you work late? You don't have a family, you don't have children, you don't have... Sounds familiar? Yes. That's a bias, right? So flexible working hours shouldn't just be for men or for women. It needs to be both. By the way, during COVID, what was one of the big things you learned about flexible working hours? Because you worked from home. You know, before COVID, we said, how lovely it is to work from home. I love your laughter. Tell us why. What was the big thing?
It's a big challenge of balancing it.
Exactly. Because
during COVID, well, everybody is home and you are supposed to be sitting and working.
Working, so you still had to deliver online classes. You had to be, Plus they go, okay, but why aren't you at your computer? Why aren't you answering? Because you can't go anywhere. So you worked around the clock. And to top it off, if you're at home, your family says, oh, how nice. Do you remember that time during COVID, everyone was baking, and that's why we all became like this, right? Do you remember that? Recipes and whatever. And they go, oh, so nice to have a little cake or whatever, right? So you were the chief cook, the chief baker, the chief worker, the chief nanny, everything. And teacher. Oh, God forbid, school's closed. And you had to teach. I'm sure you don't want that to happen. So, flexible work hours is a very important concept. Because in theory it sounds good. But then how do you manage the boundaries? And the boundaries that you put in, right? So what happens if you're in a same-sex relationship and you adopt a child? What? Paternity leave. Who said you can have that? Right? You see, we are not yet mature as a country or as institutions to think broader than he and she. Okay. So what about this one? You know the female senior manager in your company and you really admire her and you aspire to be like her. But then you hold yourself back. There's a promotion, but you hold yourself back because you think if you get promoted, no other female employees will get promotions in the future. And just 2 weeks ago, I happened to have 4 or 5 women come to me for a little reconnection, and the one person happens to be in academia at another public university that I won't mention by name, and she said, listen to this, there's 3 Indian women in my department. Not all 3 of us can get a promotion. Do the math. Where's the critical one? The analytical one. Do the math. Because what is the connotation around it? No, to ensure, never mind, all 3 may be the hottest shots when it comes to cybersecurity. Do you see what I'm saying? Do you see how complex this thing is? Right? And so the other thing is the impression that there's a limited number of spaces for women. Who said that? Right? Another gender bias. This one. Firstly, when you're pregnant, do you tell them you're pregnant when you go for an interview? Look what you're saying. God forbid. How can we employ someone who's pregnant? Because she's going to ask for 4 months leave, and then on top of it, her baby will get sick, and then she'll want to take time off. Listen to that. When you're the employer and you interviewing young women of childbearing age, are you doing that behind in your head? I bet you do. Think about it seriously. So, are you planning on coming back after you've had the baby? Hold on, I haven't even had the baby yet. But are you planning on coming back? So the kind of pressures that's put on young women of childbearing age, because your biological clock is ticking at the same time and pace as your career clock. And what are we expecting women to do? Is to take the off-ramp, and when they do, what happens? They have to play hard at catch-up. And you can't. Never mind from a salary perspective. Talking about salary. Gender pay gaps. I don't know in higher education if there are pay gaps, but most corporates have pay gaps. That you get paid, women get paid a lower amount for doing the same level of work, if not more, than their male counterparts. Same credentials, same experience, but on the basis of gender. Yes.
Not even in the same institution. In general, my husband has 2 degrees, I have 6.
Yeah.
But he earns way more than I do.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's true. It does happen. And it hurts like crazy, because then you're thinking, well, why did I waste my time getting all these credentials? Right? Look, let's take a few steps back. In the previous industrial revolutions, the men were the primary breadwinners. And that made sense. But hold on. Now, women are... How many single mothers do we have? Many, many single mothers. Women who become the primary breadwinner in their family, or the major breadwinner. Women who are taking care of extended families. And that scenario has not changed. You see, the world has evolved, but we're still running on old rules of engagement. And that's the problem. And I don't know about you, but I'd go berserk if that was the case in my house. It's me.
Must be like that, yes.
No, and look, guys, while I make a joke about that, let me just give you the reality, because when I'm telling you these things and I'm sharing this with you, it's not just an academic thing, because I see it in practice every day with the corporates and the entities I work with. I see it here and across the countries. And I'll give you a good example, this bias that sets in as well. In fact, it was that same scenario where I told you on Saturday I met with those young women, and then my husband joined us for lunch afterwards, and then they were asking him, how does he cope with the fact that I am the major, we didn't talk about breadwinner, but I was carefully choosing my word. It was because, no, here's how it went down, because I shared with them that in the last 3 years post-COVID, my husband said he runs his own business, so he would work from home because I was headhunted by Spencer Stewart for this big role, right? And he said he'll be the stay-at-home person, because there were different points in our career when his was doing that, and then I was saying, okay, good, I'll be there. And then suddenly it was that. And he said, and I remember the lady said, so how does it go down in an Indian family? Your husband cooks for you. And I'm like, collaborate. We have to collaborate on this. Because if I drive home, the first thing I do is smell what's happening in the kitchen, right? But it's not, because in most households, it's not a given that the man's going to do that. Firstly, he's going to agree to step back a bit, right? But like with gender, with diversity, inclusion, and equity, it needs a collaborative problem solving. And my son, our son, only child, he learned that very quickly. He knows that all roles, you have to collaborate to contribute. So when it comes to your personal relationship, never mind work, it's equally important. Otherwise, animosity will quickly set in. You'll be very irritated. You come to your other family, Cheryl, and then you're going to get irritated. And then you're just one irritated person, unhappy. Yeah, but it's a hard thing to do, right? And then, if there's this head of any role, and if there's a male up for it and a female, you go, he's going to get it, so I'm not going to even apply. So there's all kinds of bias situations. Worse still, and I haven't put it down here, but there's some examples of bias. Now, you may not have thought of bias as being this complex, because you just thought it could be just on the basis of race and gender. But if you went to the same school as me, and we are all gung-ho about making sure we look after one another, those who went to the same school, I may have an affinity bias to you. Right? So you have to be very clear when you... Yeah, absolutely. You're going to get the whole slide deck. Right? So, prototype. I'm not going to... You can just cast your eyes over this, but I think this is a pretty cool one. That halo effect. Putting someone on a pedestal. The pedestal. Oh my God. I have to learn this one. I'm just letting you read it so you can see. What about the beauty bias? Have you thought about that? I used to work with a very, very, very gorgeous woman maybe when I was in my 20s. And she would say this always. Who would look at this face and ever think she could do any wrong? I'm not kidding. I am not kidding. So beauty, when somebody walks into a room, what do we do? How does she look? It is true.
Shireen?
Yes.
So what would be the solution? Should we be more deliberate in how we think?
Yeah. It takes a by design approach. I have to stand here. You have to be deliberate, right? For example, like Cheryl, I often think, why did you start off by saying crazy Cheryl? No, I mean, that's your narrative, right? But what happens is that I often come across women who are trying to make up for something and they bring something into it. Like they'll make a big joke about themselves because they're trying to, before someone else does the joke. And I'm not saying it's you, Cheryl, I know you well enough now. But very often you do that. You'll turn it quickly and you'll say, oh, it's because I don't have hair, that's why, or I've got gray hair, or I'm orange hair, and that's why I behave in that way. Often, that comes before people have engaged you. So your question about the bias is being very deliberate and calling out bias. That is the big thing. When you see someone being biased on the basis of age, do you say, why are you discounting what she's saying? Let's give her a chance. If someone you can see the bias coming in recruitment. How is recruitment done? They look at your name. Do we do blind recruiting? No. How you look, which school you went to, what language you speak, and layers and layers, and yes. So beauty bias may creep in. Now, ladies and gentlemen, there's a Ivy League business school around somewhere in the world. Okay, I'll say in the US. You work out which one. they had admission policies in place. In fact, it was in the news just last week that if you didn't look a certain way, GMAT score is a perfect 800, and if you didn't, even people with 750 didn't get in. So you needed to have a profile to fit into that institution. By the way, that's the institution that was responsible for the 2008 subprime crisis. A lot of their grads were the ones, the wolves of Wall Street. So that picture is not far-fetched. Let's take it closer to home. When you're grading papers, if you had names, I'm assuming you got numbers. You don't have names. Hmm?
Now we have answer booklets, you can use only the number.
Only the number, I'm saying. Right? But let's take this one even further. How will you very quickly know which grouping of person that is? On the basis of script? Have a look. The use of language. And writing. Yeah, the script. Yeah, you can very quickly. So, when you say we're using a number, yes, it's one more step better than having a name. But you see how the bias is laden, even in your classrooms, even in your teaching. And this is stuff that we have to conscientiously do. Like when I listen to interviews being done on TV, and I listen to the interviewer and how he or she responds to a person who's not like him or her. Interesting. How is your child being treated at school? Another topic, another day. The next strategy they shared is about inclusive leadership. Speak up, be heard, and feel welcome. You can't feel welcome till you speak up and be heard. And this goes back, I can hear noises outside, but I don't think it's any drama. But you can't belong. Feel welcome is the belonging. But you can't get to that sweet spot until you speak up. Right? And then, this one I love. And this one, in practice, has shown the results. Sponsorship programs. Now we talk about mentoring and coaching. You all know what that is, right? But sponsorship programs. That I must deliberately choose you to be your sponsor. As the leader, if I choose people to sponsor, I will work with them right across the way. I will open doors for them, but if I only do it for people like myself, then the bias continues. So sponsorship, whether it is for women or people who've been previously disadvantaged on the basis of all of those things, you have to work on a sponsorship program. And this is something that I would suggest you have a discussion with your Vice Chancellor and your EXCO about. Because people think you can mentor them and then say, okay, fly now. But it doesn't always, that's the mentoring, that's the coaching. The sponsor is going to be the wind beneath your wings until you're ready to do this on your own. Yes.
Bias causes the scale to tip unevenly, so right? And is it not bias? Because you need to become aware
Yes.
of that bias.
Yes.
Is it not being biased to tip the scales back into place? Because let's say, for example,
Yeah.
it's only men
Yeah.
who are being employed and to
be biased to create a balance.
Yeah.
So you are being specifically selecting women to create a balance.
Okay, lovely question. So there's conscious bias and there's unconscious bias, right? Conscious bias is I choose to keep you out. I choose to be the gatekeeper so that you don't get to someone, right? The unconscious bias is stuff you don't know till somebody calls it out and says, do you know that this is a certain kind of bias? Now, to answer your question, is that not reverse bias? That's what you're asking me when we have to tip the scales. So it's the same way that I would ask you to look at employment, affirmative action or employment equity. Because we've had a history of imbalance, right? I mean, we won't even go into land redistribution and all of that. But if you don't have deliberate measures in place, then these things are not going to shift. So yes, it is a form of bias, but it's a by design form of bias.
Sometimes it will take a form of bias
Yes.
to create balance.
Yes,
in
and
other
this is
situations.
a form of bias, but to rectify a situation that is out of kilt. So absolutely. Okay, I don't want to lose anyone, but thank you for your question. All right, but here's the lovely juicy stat. The women who were surveyed for this Harvard Business Review case said, the research they did said 81% of those who had sponsors are 81% more likely to be satisfied with their career progression than those without sponsors. So my thing to all men and women I work with, and this is men and women, is that you have a mentor, you have a coach, but you need the sponsor. Because until you have a combination of those three, you're going to be mentored and coached left, right, and center, and you're going to become frustrated because those doors are still not opening. Yes.
Shireen,
Yes.
What exactly is a sponsor now? Give us a practical example.
Okay, so I'll give you a practical example of using my case, right? So when I was first approached to sit on boards, and you know, to sit on boards, you've got to earn your place. Okay, not everyone has to earn the place. You know, we got all kinds of people sit on board. But those who go through the legit route, somebody puts your name forward. That's a sponsor. And that person says, your first board, I remember it was a management consulting company, and they mostly dealt with mining. And I was like, what the hell do I know about mining? And the person who put me forward together with another male said, I will sponsor you, and one female did too. And I'll walk this whole journey with you, because board appointments are not short term, right? And so what they did was to work with me the first couple of months and weeks, and then like literally said, I'm going to be your shadow. And I'm going to teach you how to go through your board packs, what to look at, what to interrogate. Nobody teaches you that, right? And can I also say, such a beautiful question, Vanessa, that those first board recommendations came from old white men. I'm being deliberate about what I'm saying. Why do you think I'm being deliberate on this very topic of inclusive workplaces?
Because men of our color still oppress women.
That's one example. That's beautifully said. Because of patriarchy. Why should you sit around the board table? Right? On the basis of patriarchy and cultural dynamics. But what was the other reason I'm being deliberate? By the way, those two white men, even though I am very old now, they still think I'm their little baby. No, seriously. To this day, I sit on one board with both of them. And they still treat me as if it was that person who gave me my first lessons on boards. But I'm coming back to my question. Why am I saying deliberately they were older white men? Yes.
Maybe because of the perception that a white man would never support a woman of color.
They're the gatekeepers.
Yeah. The perception. And if anything, I have seen, and I'll come to women and women just now, I have seen, in fact, those more white men who are saying, yes, we were part of the previous dispensation. And I want to teach. I want to give back. I can't go and rewrite history. But I can introduce you to a board. And you have to go through the normal. You have to sit through the hours of grueling to make sure that your ethics and, for all the dramas that happen. You have to go through a proper selection process. But they are saying, I don't want to work against. I want to be part of the solution. And you know why I'm being deliberate about this? Because in our minds, we must stop thinking it's a them and us. It's men versus women. It's white men versus everybody else, or black men versus some of the, and I'll name drop now, right? This one. Bonang Mohale. One of the most inspirational black leaders in this country. He is so phenomenal. He will take people under his wing. And he will guide you. He will counsel you. So, and you would have heard in my narrative, fewer women. But I've had 2 great women mentors and sponsors. But let's talk about that dynamic for a minute. Women, we've got to learn to have an abundant mindset. We have to stop being bad and nasty and bitchy and all of those words to each other. Why? Why are we doing this? You spot on, but and it goes back to one of the biases I was talking about. The competition for what we think is limited spaces. If I open a door for you, how does it diminish my opportunity? You have something different that someone else is seeking. How's that going to take away from me? So the bias is complex. The biases that we have of women against women, race, gender, class, age, it's abundant. So this thing we're dealing with, this topic of creating inclusive workspaces, is not simple. And if you find that another woman's been downtrodden in the workplace, you've got to say, how can I support that woman so that she doesn't become someone's punching bag, literally and metaphorically? And then hold leaders accountable. I've been saying a lot about that, so I'm not going to say anymore. If you're a leader, you need to be held to account. And it goes all the way to the top leadership. The boards need to be held to account in corporate entities. For universities, it would be your council and your senate, right? Senate and council. Senate is the internal and then the council. But leaders need to be held to account. I gave you this example earlier where CEOs said, if I don't reach those targets for where I said diversity is a strategic asset, then you can withhold my money. why it matters. Why does all of this matter today? And it's so beautiful that we heard what was going on outside, because your voice matters. But we can't do that if we just think that it's all about we're going to sit and some benevolent person is going to walk in and change the dynamic. Remember the 3 levels I told you. It is at the macro level, it's institutional, and it's at the micro level. You. Macro, meso, micro. Just thought I'll share with you, because we've talked a lot. I just want to share with you a couple of steps. And maybe it is like a reminder of what needs to happen for the DEI strategies to be. Again, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Basically, I've shared a lot of information, some steps, some real lived experiences with you, and what I see in practice in everyday corporate, in business, in societal dynamics, and just to help you with the discussion around remember we said, what's the status quo? What can change? But you need some steps to follow in order to be able to do this, right? So by the end of today, this is what I was hoping for, and I'm still hoping for, that we can demonstrate a business case for diversity. And remember, business is rands and cents. And I told you earlier, if you can demonstrate there's a bottom line result that will motivate for the case of diversity. Second one, that you will recognize individual and organizational factors that lead to discrimination. And we talked about the different kinds of biases that lead to discriminatory practices. Then develop a plan to diversify your workforce, and we talked about how recruiting needs to be blind and how you make sure that you're bringing in the right talent. The why. Ask yourself why you are doing this, right? And then identify ways to implement and design diversity. To the young lady's question at the back, it has to be by design, because you won't change any dynamic if it is not by design. If you ask the youth of our country, they may argue that Madiba did not negotiate hard enough, and that is why we are still sitting with the land problem, if you ask the youth of our country, right? Just another topic for another day. All right? And then to construct a communication strategy. Because we can talk about these things, but if we don't have one coherent golden narrative that is shared amongst everyone in an institution, then people will just get nuggets of information, and it will depend on who's telling the story. Because then it can be turned around to say, well, this is what it actually means. But if you have a coherent communication strategy, then that takes care of all the uncertainties. So, step 1, very quickly. Reflect on the dimensions, present or absent, of diversity in your organization. And that means you have to hold the mirror up to yourself, you and the leadership. And if you say there's only 2 or 3 women at the senior positions, and that's the mirror to self. Then analyze the current state of DEI in your organization. For example, the demographics, the top positions. And this is a lovely one. The feelings. What is the mood of your people because of the fact that this is not diverse? Because we talk about you can see who's in what positions, because you have an organogram and you can see the faces. But what are the feelings of people who are in your institution? And explore the avenues of improvement from your viewpoint. Number 2, examine opportunities for and barriers to increasing diversity and inclusion. In other words, who stands between you and achieving that outcome? And then, what are the opportunities you gain by achieving that outcome? Again, you need a detailed analysis of the primary barriers. So it's not he said, she said, we said, or it looks like this, or I feel like this, because that's the narrative that often gets used when we're talking about diversity and inclusion. But a proper detailed analysis on the primary barriers to increasing diversity in your organization. And you have to look at it at an organizational level as well as an individual level. Recruitment and retention that can support diversity. We talked about this again, and I said be very deliberate. If you are, who you bringing in and who you keeping out. How do you recruit for the best talent for what you want the university to attain? Not because you have a quota to fill, but because you have an agenda around what's the institutional goals. Conduct a thorough analysis of your organization's processes in terms of attraction, and sadly there's no one here from HR, recruitment and promotion. And the people who are seated at those tables when it comes to attraction. How, for example, how do you do your ads when you're advertising positions? It starts there, right? And how are JDs written? It starts there. Because when you're writing the JD, you're starting with a person in mind, as opposed to, I want the best expert in this thing, right? And then the actual recruitment process. Do you strip people of their dignity in these recruitment processes? I know there was one very clever professor that I met in a business school. He had to show how clever he was in every interview for a new person joining that business. He had to use the jargon to show how clever he was. And if I don't want to swear, but he was that kind of person. And promotion and explore potential areas for improvement. So promotion is the contentious issue. Because yes, there are interview processes and so on. But if you want to change if you really want to change and become diverse and inclusive, you will be deliberate about the appointments. You will take the hits and the pain that goes with that by design approach. But if that doesn't change, then you'll be stuck with the status quo. I'm big on data. So what data can and should be collected and how to use it. So we move away, like I said, the touchy-feely words. I believe, I know, I feel, I think. But the data shows. How can you argue with the data? The data is saying this very clearly. And so how do you use, big data? Those of you who teach all that stuff here. And then describe precisely how your organization tracks, including how it collects data, employs the processes, and can improve DEI. So I'll come to you now. When I talk about tracking, it's important, because here's what also happens. We invest a lot of energy in getting projects off the ground, and then it unfolds, and then we don't monitor and evaluate. And then, as you monitor and evaluate, you should be attenuating or amplifying certain behaviors so that you get to the intended outcome. Because sometimes there's going to be unintended outcomes, right? Therefore, you have to keep attenuating or amplifying. There we go.
The other side of it also is that I don't just want to be promoted because I'm a female.
No, for sure.
Because then they turn around afterwards and say, yeah, but we had to give this position to fill that tick or get that target.
Beautiful.
I want to be employed or promoted because I was the best one.
Agreed. And here's how I would argue that you think about this. Quite right. None of us wants to be a token, right? Because then it's for all the wrong reasons. And then all those other words that, we just gave you an opportunity, and now look, women, you give them an opportunity. I heard words like that, by the way. So here's what I want to say. When you talk about the best, the givens are in place. The givens is you've got your qualifications, you've got your experience, you've got your ethics and your value system. Those are the given. So then you can't question, does that make sense? Okay, good question. Yes.
From my experience, it's very much an ethic issue as well.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you are aware that you're being used as a token, but your integrity is not in check. So you become part of the game.
Yeah. And it's about the rules of, yeah.
You make it bad for other women who need to come up.
So it's a touchy subject, because people will argue, the counter of that would say, yes, I know I'm being used as a token, but if I don't get a leg in or a shoe in, we will never change the dynamic. And if 2 or 3 more of us get in, we can change the dynamic. But the flip side of it is, when you get in, do you become one of, or do you go, okay, I know that was the initial entry to the game, but now I'm here and we have critical mass and I can change that dynamic. So it's not, it's what you do when you're in that sphere, right? Yes, ethics, exactly.
The person who become employed also falls in the trap of being in front, because they don't really have a voice.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
do whatever the people who put you there.
Yeah. Because they expect you to be quiet. Just, you're there because we did you a favor and gave you now you must keep quiet. Well, it's not going to happen. You women are not going to keep quiet, right? But you also have to be very deliberate about when you have a seat at the table. We talked about the table. And the seat at that table requires you, ladies, you do this every day in your homes. Think about how deliberate you are about the way you run your homes, your personal lives. What changes when you are around these tables? And I know you could, you come back at me and you say, yeah, but it's self-preservation, because if we open our mouths, we're going to be victimized and. But the system is designed to break you down like that. One bit at a time. And if I keep suppressing you and I keep saying you're not good enough, then you start to believe that. The macro level challenges and opportunities for diversity, we talked about macro level, the policies, and describe the current design and implementation strategies within your organization and what you plan to change. And so, Tessie, I'm coming to you with this lovely invitation, because you are part of this, and a whole lot of you are part of the Women in Leadership Forum, right? And you run this program. Fabulous. So now, my challenge to you is, what's the next step? Do you see? So it says, this is the entry. Now you're sitting with about 100 people who've gone through this program. And now what? What's the plan to change? I have a few ideas. Create your strategy with examples you can adapt for your organization. And remember, we're not naive. We know there's a political wool around a lot of things. But go for the low-hanging fruit first. That is why I was saying to Tessie, I love this program, because for you to be sitting around this and more men in attendance as we go forward, you will start to see the groundswell happen. And all through history, there's an example. I mean, who would have thought Israel? I mean, have you been watching the news? People protesting in Israel. Exactly. It's a blank sheet of paper. Okay? And that's what your strategy needs to look at. What's the needs of your people? Remember, let's go back to the why. Why do we exist? Not just for us in this room. Why are we in this room? Because we stand in front of the classrooms and you're changing and shaping lives. This is not transactional. This is for real.
So that is why we have to ask, what is the needs of our students?
Yep. That is why, even though we all got jittery earlier, what is the need? There's a why behind it.
What's the pain?
Yeah, exactly.
Do we really know our students? That's the question.
Exactly.
A lot of staff just see them as a number.
Yeah.
But they're not.
Yeah, or sometimes, oh my God, these children, they should rather be on holiday, right? But we are here because of them. The why we need to change, the why we need a diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy. Because they're looking up to you, and they are the emerging leaders. And if you don't mirror and show that, then the next generation and the next generation and the next will have exactly the same. Yes.
Just to add on that,
Mm.
in my class, because of the cost of women in leadership, now and then I do take a stance to say, guys, or the male students and female students, have this continuous talk of saying we need to look at each other as persons. Even if you go to a workplace, where you are working or studying towards a male-dominant space, so we need to continuously say, if you go there, you're just going to get the qualification, the experience, and if you're going to be employed on that, not because you're a woman, not because you're a man. And that is really the foundation that we need to give them when they go to the workplace.
Absolutely, but it can't be one of you doing it. It needs to be a golden thread in, because the curriculum is one thing, the curriculum geared towards a qualification is one thing, but it's the other parts that happens in the class that is far more important. Because truthfully, sorry, I'm being rude like this again, but we can go to Google University and learn everything. But what's our jobs here? And so, as I close, I want to say, we're never going to get, with all there's other slides that I've just cut out, and I'm going to stop here. The hill we climb. You may remember this young Amanda Gorman at Barack Obama's inauguration. And so we lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. Thank you.